Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Dog Trainers Podcast. This is episode 7, Why Dog Training is Important. Stick around.
Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with Nan's best friend. Episode 7, Why Dog Training is Important. Welcome back, everybody. This is Brent, and that guy's Mariano, and this is episode 7 of the Pod Trainers Podcast. Today, we're going to be answering a very common question that we find out online. It is, why is dog training important? Now, as dog trainers, we have a huge opinion on this. But for those of you who are maybe on the fence, or those of you who are interested in just learning more about the field, you may catch on to a couple nuances that you didn't really know as part of dog training. So I guess to kind of answer this question, Mariano, let's go ahead and start off with like every profession, every service comes from, solving some type of problem.
Right.
So what problems would you say exist, and what do dog trainers, how does dog training affect and help those problems?
Well, a few of the biggest problems that we see, it's funny that some of the problems were bred in being potential solutions to other problems, but they kind of steamrolled into a problem of their own. And that would be something like information overload, because
Right.
we have access to so many videos and different training methods or websites. And it's not that it's wrong to have that stuff. It's just without guidance, people can easily lose themselves in it and then just decide, you know what, I don't know what to do, so I'm not going to do anything.
Right. And just
Um,
to add to that real quick, like if you guys think of, if those of you who are listening right now, 20 years ago, there was one, maybe two methods of dog training. Right now, you can go on YouTube and get confused out of your mind of what dog training is.
oh yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. Within our lifetime, things have changed dramatically.
Yeah, some strong opinions on all sides, and I think that the best advice that anyone can give you is, number one, do what makes the most sense for you and your dog, and of course that's within reason. I would definitely say to stick to a method, whatever the method, that is tried and true, and we know that they work and we know that they're effective and they're safe and everything like that, but do what's right for you. That's
Right.
probably the best advice any dog trainer could give you. To get back to the problems, though, I think the biggest problem, the original problem, is just there's a lack of understanding. People either don't understand why a dog does a certain thing, or they know what the dog's doing and get why, like a dog wanting to chase a squirrel, but they don't exactly know how to go about explaining to the dog that they don't like this or that it's unacceptable.
Right. Stuff like digging, stuff like chewing, stuff like hunting, stuff like barking, like there was a time where all of these behaviors were actually sought after. But really, part of our dog training job is to understand animal behavior in a way that we could explain and then teach you eventually how to deal with it.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because, when we talk about lack of understanding, that can go a lot of different ways, because even from owner to owner, when we talk about things like some
Mhm.
things even today are highly sought after, there's hunting dogs that definitely have great jobs to do and they do them well, or protection dogs or whatever the case. But when the dog doesn't know what their job is, or the owner doesn't know how to give a dog a job and hold them to it, then we
Right.
start to have kind of these misfires between things. And that's when it's our job to step in, figure out what needs to happen in order to get things where they need to go. And then we
Right.
get to work.
Love that. I love that. What other problems can you think of?
I mean, I can give a couple examples to problems very quickly. So here's a problem. I just did a lesson a little while ago today. I actually think this is the same client that I spoke to you guys about last time, episode 6. So
Mm.
it's a very reactive dog. It's a hunting dog. It's a mix of a coonhound and border collie and a few other things, and super high prey drive, super high, a willingness and an energy to just control things, and a focus like you wouldn't believe. And so the problem is the dog is very sweet and very loving of the mom, but he's very dominant and he's very controlling and he's very possessive. So people walk in the house and it's all bets are off. He's barking, he's lunging in the crate, out of the crate, on a leash. If he's on the couch hanging out and they try to kick him off, it's a problem with growling. And that's a
Right.
huge misunderstanding on the on dog and the owner's part. So today I met with them, and with the work that we've already done, I was explaining to them how a lot of our work together is going to be building this mutual understanding between you two, so that you can start to explain to your dog in a way that he gets. That's the key thing here, in a way that the dog understands that this is not acceptable.
Right. Right. I totally get that. And so kind of what you're saying is there's a misunderstanding between both parts. And I think in all these problems it goes both ways. It goes dog to owner, owner to dog. And we're going to see that whether it's a lack of understanding from species to species, We speak different languages. Dogs aren't born understanding English. And dogs are not necessarily the best at developing relationships, and so funny, neither are humans, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess problem wise, we start seeing this rift between two separate species that are actually very drawn to each other. And this is how it's been since the domestication of wolves.
Yeah, it's always been an interesting topic, and I actually wanted to hear your thoughts on why dog training is important because I'll definitely riff on it a bit with you, but I think that the way that you explain it is something that I found very like informative and entertaining. So if you could, why is dog training important?
Oh man, it's a multi-layered question, but I mean, other than just solving some of the surface problems that we run across as dog owners and dog people, or just animal lovers in general, dog training, in my opinion, has a lot of little nuances to it that definitely helped me get through certain developmental stages of my life. But then I didn't know it was dog training, and then when you become a professional, certain things are actually techniques that people practice and teach on purpose, right? But I would say the first thing is developing communication, right? Dog training is really about developing understanding and communication between two dogs or between two species, right? So we don't naturally speak dog, and dogs don't naturally speak human. And in essence, in dog training, what we're doing is we're trying to bridge this gap. We're trying to understand their language a little bit, but then we're also trying to teach them our language and expectations so that we can have kind of a symbiotic relationship, and in essence have an effective relationship with a member of a different species, right?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry. Well, I noticed that a funny thing that I kind of tell people is like humans speak emotion and dogs speak body language, and there's this huge disconnect. Um, One thing that I kind of wanted to direct you toward though, because I thought it was kind of cool, was again, this is fresh in my mind because of my lesson earlier, but people need to understand that dogs and people have very different needs and wants, and especially when we consider specific breeds, because people get stuck with that kind of stuff too. Like I got a Great Dane. Why isn't he super athletic and energetic? And um,
Right, because he's 150 pounds.
I
That's
re-
why.
right. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit on how important is it for owners to understand the difference in needs, what a dog needs versus what the owner needs, and how can they go about kind of meshing those in the middle.
Right, and I think just like any relationship, right? Like we run across relationships with significant others, with employers, with colleagues at work, and the reality of it is dog training, or at least dog training specifically for your dog, is learning how to find a balance in your relationship between what the dog needs and what the owner needs, right? So, if you have a big dog like a Great Dane, there's going to be certain things that you can't develop or won't be able to do with that dog that you could do with a Chihuahua or a different type of dog, right? So I guess for dog owners, dog training is important to also understand how you need to kind of customize what your expectations, what your needs, desires, all that stuff is based on all of the variables looked at as the big picture, right? So where you live, what kind of dog you have, all those things. And our job as dog trainers to really help you guys come up in essence, I kind of always call it relationship counseling. So we're trying to see, okay, you have a partner, which is your dog, and then you have you, and these are your needs, these are the dog's needs and wants, these are your needs and wants, and how do we find a way for those things to work in harmony with one another, so that way the dog can be happy, and the people who own the dog or take care of the dog can also be happy and live long happy lives with
Right.
great memories and things like that. Um, so in essence, dog training is important because we want to develop strong communication skill, but most importantly, what we start seeing, it is a relationship building tool, right? I always joke, as I said, we're relationship counselors for dogs and their pets. That's the gist of it. That's what dog trainers do. Now, I guess how we do this, there's a bunch of different ways. I'm going to shoot it over to Mariano real quick. Go ahead and break down, I guess, what you would consider to be your top five. What is dog training in
Yeah.
general?
Perfect. So that's what I was hoping to get to next, because people, just to reiterate, is once people understand why it's important, that's the question you get next. Like, okay, I get that, but like how now? Right? So we've broken down dog training into 5 different segments here. So routine development, communication, behavioral development, socialization, and relationship development. Now,
Totally.
routine development, that's something that you can do. It's almost training when you're not training. So an example being, if I have a client who their dog has this habit of staring. They sit on the couch, stare out the window, and just yap at everybody and everything that comes by. When the owners
Hmm.
are home, they can practice much healthier habits for the dog so that they let go of that like incessant, obsession to just bark at everything and defend the house. But when they're
Right.
not home, maybe there's a better sort of routine, something that they can do to avoid that behavior so that it doesn't continue to feed itself and just make training harder or longer than it needs to be. So that would be something like crate training, or even just
Right.
separating the dog from the room with the big old window. Or, there's so many different times or options when eliminating possibilities are just so much easier, so much safer, healthier. And when you have the time and, and can effectively and, and appropriately train a dog, even under these certain distractions, because it's good to address these things directly when the dog is ready. But when you can't, routine is a huge, huge thing.
Yeah.
Communication, that's, I want to say maybe 90% of it. And Brent and I have a joke. I'm sure every dog trainer has this joke that like 99% of dog training is people training
Yep.
because
For
dogs
sure.
do, it's funny, right? Because dogs do communicate with you, but they communicate with you like a dog communicates with you. So people don't always get it. And people
Right.
have
Because it's
this,
subtle.
go ahead.
It's subtle. No, I was just gonna say, yeah, 'cause the way they communicate is subtle. It's not obvious. We're used to verbal language, and they're used to physical body language.
You know what's funny too that I noticed is it is subtle, but it's also like sometimes people are expecting human communication and humans communicate in other ways. Like humans can also be like sneaky and can also like lie and so
Mhm.
a lot of times the dog looks at you real perfect. You ever been there? Like, you go to a friend's house and the dog's just staring right in their face, tail wagging, and they're like, what did you do? Like, why are you looking
Yeah.
at me all cute? And it's a joke, but in certain circumstances, people don't quite get it, and they expect like treachery from a dog. That's just a very simple thing in its understandings of the world. So I bring that up to say a great way to build communication is to start setting these little like blueprints, and we do that in the form of obedience. Okay, so I was just
Right.
talking about this a little earlier. A dog a dog runs to the door and barks at the pizza man, and the owners are like, "No, no, don't do that. Don't do that." And the dog has no idea what's happening. If you're
Like, don't
saying,
do that. So, yeah, they
yeah,
have
like,
no
"Don't
clue.
do what?" Or maybe the dog doesn't even know the word no because it hasn't been conditioned, but obedience could make all that simpler because not only could you effectively teach a dog a verbal no or a verbal out, let's say, but you could
Right.
also work toward avoiding the whole thing. You know what? Go to your crate. I know the pizza man's here. They text me when they're like outside, or go to place or lay down, or so you can give very specific, very simple guidelines that really help a dog along the way, especially when they're stuck, which is when dogs make mistakes anyway.
Right, right. And it's funny because through obedience, like we learn to kind of increase a dog's vocabulary. Learn how to not just speak with our words. We learn how to speak with our bodies. We learn how to speak with our gestures. We learn how to make it make sense to dogs. And then after a while, what ends up happening, our dogs get so fluent in the things that we're doing that we can just speak to them like, "Hey, go get your bone and bring it over here so I can throw it," and the dog knows exactly what that means,
Right.
right? So just to recap real quick, routine development and communication via obedience. So far, this is what we're talking about. One way that I like to break down routine development: put the dog in the right place at the right time to develop the right behaviors.
Hmm.
But that can also work in the opposite, right? You can put the dog in the wrong place at the wrong time to develop the wrong behaviors. So really figuring out what the right routine for your dogs are, as Mariano said earlier, is a very specific, subjective thing to you and your family and your dog's needs. So yeah, and communication, obedience, it's key. You have to. I would say 99.9% of dogs know how to sit on command.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not just the sit, it's the development of everything else. All right. What's next, Mariano?
I want to hear your thoughts on socialization because the way that you phrase that routine development, right place at the right time for the right behavior. I
Hmm.
know socialization, in particular, is something that you've taught me a ton about throughout the years. So I'd like to hear you if you could.
Yeah, no, I love that. So socialization to me has a couple different tiers to it, right? So one form of socialization is what I call exposure, right? So we just want to take dogs when they're really, really young, and we want to socialize them by exposing them to different environments, different people, different animals, different sounds. And let's be realistic. You just have to socialize your dog with whatever their life is going to be, right? So if you live in the country and you only hang out with 5 people your whole life, do you need to do extensive human socialization? like someone in the city would. For the benefit of humans, yes, but realistically, don't break your back necessarily feeling that you have to, socialize the heck out of that dog if he's only ever going to run into 5 people or 5 animals
Right.
in his whole lifestyle. So what we want to do is we want to expose dogs to the areas of our lifestyle that we would potentially run into now and in the future, right? The other part is going to be what I call in interacting, right? So we have to teach dogs, and sometimes dogs teach each other. Like we have to teach dogs how to interact with other humans, right? So some of the most common behaviors that we see when they're young, so many puppies are biting, they're mouthing, they're nipping, and they're doing things that they would do to another animal. And teaching our dogs how to appropriately interact with humans versus teaching them how to interact with other and how to act with other animals based to our human standard. This is where it varies. And then the other aspect would be what we consider to be manners, right? So part of socialization is going to be self-control, decision making. Socialization goes a little further on the third tier, where we are actually going to expect our dogs to behave a certain way in certain contexts, right? So if I have a dog on a leash, is it good manners for my dog to just leave my side and bolt and want to go sniff the other dog? Or is that bad manners? For me, as a human and as a dog trainer, that to me is one of the most unsafe things that a dog can do. If my dog loves dogs so much that without permission or without self-control, he just impulsively runs over to that other dog and says, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. Can I sniff your butt?" The likelihood of my dog getting snapped at, bit, et cetera, is a lot higher. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't let our dogs play with other dogs. It just means there's a time and a place, like dog parks or open fields or play dates with dogs, daycares, where we can allow those dogs to actually integrate and socialize with dogs in an appropriate fashion off of a leash.
Yeah, and because it's not necessarily reasonable to expect a dog to understand all of these mannerisms of like when and where. That's why they ask for permission. Can I do it now? No? Okay, good.
Yeah.
We'll let
Yeah.
you know.
And ultimately, all of this stuff, to really bring it all together, dog training is so that we can keep our loved four-legged furry family member safe, right? Because we take these animals, these dogs who, yeah, they come from wolves, but they're 33,000 years, uh, you know, uh, domesticated, and it's a different species. But they have certain instincts that if we don't teach them how to behave in our world, they run the risk of either damaging themselves, damaging others, and we don't want that for our loved ones, not at all.
Right. Sorry, I was just trying to think. Love, what was it? Our loved
Our loved one, our loved pets, our loved four-legged pets.
loved four-legged furry family member. I'm trying to like say that fast in my head. That's what you said.
I know. Hey,
Um,
we'll listen to the playback. We'll see what I said.
yeah, so just to move it along, I want to talk a little bit about behavioral development. And
Mhm,
if you notice that it sounds similar to the phases of socialization, it's because a lot of dog training, a lot of the tools that they learn kind of bounce off of each other and kind of add to each other. And
mhm,
so they
mhm,
kind of learn these things at a similar speed. An example being behavioral development would be the things that you teach your dog directly, how they start to have indirect benefit. Okay,
mhm,
so we were just talking about manners. If you
mhm,
teach a dog how to sit and you really drill sit with a release, because we know that sometimes people don't always teach a release. It's like sit, good, sit, good, sit, good. But it's you
mhm,
sit and then you have a release command. Yes, break, okay, whatever the case. What you're drilling is sit and the release command. But also if you start to drag it out, sit, give it a second, okay, break, whatever the case.
mhm,
Inadvertently, without the dog necessarily even realizing, you're teaching patience. You're sitting until I
mhm,
say go, and then you can have the food. Even if you see it in my hand, even if I bend down toward the ground as if I'm kind of mocking me handing it to you until I release you, then you can have it. So behavioral development is something that the dogs become more well-rounded other than just face value of commands. Like my dog can sit and lay down. I've heard this one before. I know you have too, because we were in the same room, I think, a couple times where it was like,
right.
he's super well trained. He's really good. We did this training, that training, this training, but he's really nervous around bicycles. He's really nervous around big trucks.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so a lot of times it's hard for people to bridge those gaps. My dog knows this, but now how can you make him like calmer and happier?
Right. Right. Um, are you there?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yep. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I thought I lost
I was letting it soak in.
you. Letting it breathe.
Exactly.
Yeah, and another way that I look at behavior development is a very similar, but like you guys got to remember, we dogs not only are born with instincts, but throughout the years, through breeding, selective breeding, we've created dogs that have very, very highly concentrated abilities, right? Whether they be hunting, tracking, seeking things out, killing things like terriers. There's so many different skill sets that we bred for that the dogs actually come out of the womb and they are already programmed to be obsessed over something. And so ultimately in dog training, when we're doing behavior development, we're teaching dogs how to control those superpowers that we bred into them over the several thousands of years, right? And we're teaching them how to be able to fit into the lifestyle that we live while also being able to allow them to use their superpowers from time to time. Right. That's how I always refer to their breed skills. They have superpowers. And so behavior development is either going to be teaching our dogs to combat something that is, or some people can call this behavior modification. But behavior development would be us teaching the dog to control already existing instincts and superpowers. So that way those things do not control them.
Right.
Right. So that's how I would put it. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And finally, we have relationship development, which goes along a similar strain. I think that lends itself a bit more to what we talked about earlier, which was managing expectation and understanding the differences between dogs and owners. And a lot of
Hmm.
relationship development is that it's the behavioral side of it. It's understanding that dogs were bred for very certain specific things, and so it's very innate and it's very much we've talked about self-reinforcing behaviors, positive feedback loops, and there needs to be a certain understanding of if your dog does something, especially something that's unsafe, like bolting away from you to go sniff a dog, whether we know that that dog's friendly or not, or if it's across the street. The dog
Right.
has good intention, but there's reasons outside of that why this just isn't okay.
Right.
And so we're trying
Right.
to find that middle ground of how we can get there. That's when we talk about the obedience and everything else, socialization. So the dog knows what to do, when to do it, but the owners and dogs need to understand mutually why this stuff matters right now. And how can we best manage what I expect from you versus you being able to do enough of what you want to just enjoy your life and be a great and happy dog.
Right.
And it's a balancing act.
Right. Right. And I mean, and here's another way we look at relationship development, guys. And because it sounds, when I first heard relationship development, it sounded like this vague idea of like, oh, it's like, you're the dog, you teach your dog to fall in love with you. Or you teach your dog to, listen to you better and just adore you more. So to ultimately relationship development is really having a clear understanding of what your role in the relationship is and an understanding of what your partner wants and needs, right? That's ultimately what the relationship development is. So from the human standpoint, we have to know how our dog is, what our dog is, what their little nuances and ticks are. We have to get to know them to that intimate level. And on that same note, our dogs need to know what our ticks are, what our moods are, what our communication styles are, and most importantly, what we expect from them. Because the key in the relationship is if I understand you and you understand me and we're consistent with it, then you will start seeing a huge behavior shift in that person's presence. Right. So I think, like, as a dog trainer, the biggest complaint we get is like, the dogs are always better when you're around. Right. You ever hear that, Mariano?
Oh yeah, he's always good. I think I heard it today. He was just really good today. I think it's because he knew
Yeah.
you were coming.
Right. And they always say stuff like that. And they say, oh, he's not doing it now because you're
Right.
here. And always what I tell people is they always say, they say things like, well, the dog's better when you're here. And I always respond by saying, well, you're better when I'm here
Right.
also. That's why he's not misbehaving.
Dude, that's my phone when I take it to Verizon. Whatever problem just works when I'm in the store, and they look at me like I'm crazy. And
It's the car at the mechanic thing.
yeah,
It's never works. But the reality of it is there are little things that we that you know that we can do better as the partner in the relationship with our dogs. Whether it be more empathetic, be more understanding, be more consistent, develop more confidence and security in our relationship with our dogs. Like, literally, I've seen every simple thing that could go wrong in a human relationship. I've seen it go wrong in a dog relationship.
right.
everything, like every single thing. Like, it's just, this is a human, this is part of the human experience. Like,
Yeah, it's crazy. Jealousy, lack of boundary. Yeah, it is crazy what issues
you
people
see
can.
you see everything develop in dog related, that these dogs wouldn't develop this naturally in the wild. They only develop it living with humans. So in essence, like, we develop these problems. And the reason relationship development is our last point that we want to make is we are relationship counselors for dogs, and they're humans.
Mhm.
Pretty much that's what it is. It's like we love dogs, we advocate for them, because they don't have a verbal voice. So our job is to really teach you guys, how to be the best partner to your dog that you can be.
Can I inject some future food for thought for the young trainers that are listening to this?
Oh yes, please do.
Here's a fun one, and I know you'll agree. It's it's especially complex to be the, like, relationship counselor between dog and owner, where there's multiple owners that feel differently about training.
Hmm,
So there's, like,
hmm.
the mom who's really
It's a
okay with.
family
Yeah,
counselor.
right. So a lot of times it's like the mom has no problem being firm, and the dad is like, he's like, "Oh, well, I just wanna baby my dog, and, when I was younger in Minnesota, I just had a dog outside," and
Yep, 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 yep.
then we have to bridge that gap and then the dog gap all at the same time. So young trainers,
Mhm.
we hear you. That's something we'll get you there. Just stick around. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
I wanna I
definitely.
wanna I wanna ask you something, Brent. So now that we've kinda talked about what dog training is, pragmatically speaking, and we've broken it down to those 5 segments. There's routine development, communication, behavioral development, socialization, and relationship development.
Yep.
But we started with why dog training is important, right? It builds communication. We have that relationship building aspect to it and understanding the differences in dogs and people. Why then do so many people get it wrong? And I'm kinda asking that in terms of clients and even some dog trainers.
Um, how people really get it wrong.
Like,
Again,
why?
how
How or why?
well, a lot of times people, they get it wrong. To start off, people get it wrong because they don't know what to do. Right? As you mentioned earlier, there's this information overload sometimes on the internet. People don't know what the right method, idea, technique, and everything is going to be for their dog. So they get confused. They know they have to do dog training. They just have no freaking clue what they should be doing or how to get the result that they want, how to do it in a way that they can back up and believe in. So that's one reason. I think another one is, some people have this very surface level idea of what dog training might be. So, like, very commonly we see people think that dog training is sitting and rolling over and giving paw and things like that. But in actuality, dog training is everything that we've described. When you go into the deeper levels, right now, I can't necessarily blame people for thinking those things, because if you go to some of the corporate dog training companies, we start seeing, like, PetSmart, Petco. These people, they do training, in a way that is simply that, right? And
Right.
they want to sell you group classes where, you teach your dog these tricks and you teach these dogs these commands. But the reality of it is these dog trainers do not have the education, and experience to be able to teach you anything outside of those fields,
Right.
outside of into behavioral issues or anything like that. They literally strictly just teach you obedience and communication. So it's, some people think dog training is stupid, right? I had a intern of mine who was so funny, because when we first met her, she would say things like, dog training, like, yeah, I could do it, but, like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, dogs, I don't get how, like, rolling over, giving paws, like, good for anything. In essence, like, I just think dogs should just be, free, and they should be animals. And she was even going far out to the left field, where she was saying, like, dogs shouldn't have been domesticated in the first place.
Right.
And I could totally come to her with empathy and understand, like, I get what you're saying. In essence, what she was saying, she was frustrated at, we fuck it up so much as humans, right? 33,000 years of domestication, and we still haven't figured this dog stuff out 100% as a culture, as a race, as a human race, right? Um, so it's totally frustrating. And in her mind, she just thought, well, we shouldn't have domesticated them in the first place.
You
So
know,
go ahead.
it's funny too. You and I had this conversation like 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know if you remember. Brent and I are good friends, other than than people who work in the same field, and we used to get off of work together and go hang out at a bar. I forgot the name of that bar. But
Oh, the West Side Pavilion. Yeah.
there you go. And I remember one night you and I were sitting down, and it was after like a long day. I think we worked and then did a video and then went to the bar. Um,
Right.
and I was talking to you about like, I'm kind of getting there now. I'm getting a little comfortable and getting good, but I really want to do something that matters. I don't know if you remember this, but we really dove into it like soon thereafter, and I think we made a video, or check out our older video, Good Dog versus Trained Dog, and
Mhm.
it was helping me understand really at the time dog training is bigger than just making dogs sit and lay down. It's building communication. In many cases, it's keeping a dog in a home where people would otherwise have to give up their dog, or whatever the case. Especially now with things going on, I'm hearing people are giving up dogs like crazy, and shelters and things are closing down. And it's really important work to teach people the understanding. It can make their lives safer, it can make them happier, and a lot of people need dogs for like emotional support, or other services for like medical issues. And it's a big thing. So, it's definitely, and we're not slamming Petco, mind you. The thing about the market in any sort of industry is there's something out there for every like consumer. Like we said in the beginning, that dog training, like any other business, is there to fill a need. And some people all they want is like a lower price tag and just some
Mhm.
very basic intro to dog training stuff. And either that's enough for them forever, or it's enough for them just to kind of dip their toe in the pond, and then later on they'll look into further training with like us. Or but yeah,
Right.
it's a
You're
fun one.
you're always going to have your McDonald's, you're always going to have your Five Guys, you're always going to have your, Gordon Ramsay burger.
Right.
Right? There's different levels of expertise and knowledge and effort and ingredients that get put into whatever services that you're looking for
Yeah.
sure. I love that, man. I love that. Cool, guys. Well, I think we kind of summed it up. Let's go ahead and just recap it for them real quick. Why is dog training important? Dog training is important um, to allow you to, have better understanding with your dog, to have a stronger relationship and a more effective relationship with the different species, to be able to live in harmony and coexist with animals that we've not only bred but we've actually forced to live into our human worlds and lifestyles. So and most importantly, what I feel is dog training teaches us so much about ourselves, right? So much about patience, so much about consistency, so much about confidence, so much about leadership, so much about you know introspection, right? There are so many times I used to relate when I was a younger dog trainer. If there was a dog that I could not train, I would go and ask one of my mentors, and I'd say, "What's going on?" And they would literally bring up something that was weak in me. You're
Hmm.
not patient enough. You're getting too frustrated. You're not consistent enough. You're so busy playing with the dog that he thinks you're his playmate. You're not this. And so it just opened my eyes to not only my dog relationships, but it opened up to my socials networks too. Why certain people treated me a certain way, why I kept getting myself in the same problems. Um, and so on a personal note, dog training has also taught me so much about myself. And so on a very, very personal note, the amount of introspection that one can do when learning dog training or learning to just train your dog, it makes you a better training dogs make you a better human. Let's just say that. I would say it makes you a better human if you learn to train your own dog.
Agreed.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, we want to thank you guys for joining us on our 7th episode of the Dog Trainers Podcast. My name is Brent Labrada, and that guy over there is Mariano Alvarez. We're going to go ahead and leave our Instagram handles down here. And please go ahead and feel free to email us at the dogtrainerspodcast@gmail.com. Send us any questions that you guys might have, any ideas that you guys would like to listen to on this podcast. We really look forward to hearing and interacting and engaging with you guys. I guess till next time, we'll see you guys soon. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.